is the day that you have made. Whatever comes, I won't complain. For all my hope is in your name, and now your joy awaits my praise. I give thanks for all you have done, and I will sing of your mercy and your love. Your love is unfailing. Lord, I am grateful. When I was down, you brought me out. You set my feet on higher ground. So here I stand. You are my God. Your faithfulness, my solid rock. Yeah, I give thanks for all you have done, and I will sing of your mercy and your love. Your love is unfailing. Lord, I am grateful. I give thanks for all you have done, and I won't forget all the battles you have won. Your love is unfailing. Lord, I am grateful. And as we lift our hands, the heavens open, so let our lives declare the love our God has spoken. Oh, come on, church, sing it out. And as we lift our hands, the heavens open, so let our lives declare the love our God has spoken over us. I give thanks for all you have done, and I will sing of your mercy and your love. Your love is unfailing. Lord, I am grateful. I give thanks for all you have done, and I won't forget all the battles you have won. Your love is unfailing. Lord, I am grateful. Come on, give him some praise this morning. Thank you, Jesus. Hey, we're excited that y'all are here today. Why don't y'all go around and shake somebody's hand, give somebody a hug. All right, like I said, we're excited to see y'all this morning. We're going to continue to worship, so why don't y'all keep standing if you will. We need no other hiding place. Our hope is safe within your name. This we know. This we know. You promise never to forsake. fullness of your word. This we know, this we know. Come on, church, sing this out. And every enemy will flee as we declare your victory. This we know, this we know. Your shackles are no more, for Jesus Christ has broken every chain. And I will call upon the Lord, for He alone is strong enough to save. And rise, your shackles are no more, for Jesus Christ has broken every chain. Oh, He's broken every chain. He's broken every chain. Oh. So we just want to remind y'all, every Sunday we say that this here at the front of the stage is an altar. And if you need prayer, if you need to pray, we want to encourage y'all to come up front, and the church family will come up and they will pray with you. Or maybe you just simply need to pray with somebody. We want to encourage you, if you just simply need prayer, go to somebody. Maybe it's the person next to you, maybe the person somewhere else in the room. Say, hey, can you pray for me? We just really want to encourage y'all in this time to please just pray for each other in this moment. Walking around these walls, I thought by now they'd fall, but you have never failed me yet. to come, knowing the battle's won. For you have never failed me yet. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands, and this is my confidence. You've never failed me yet. You never failed me. And I know the night won't last. Your word will come to pass. My heart will sing your praise again. Jesus, you're still enough. Keep me within your love. Oh, my heart will sing your praise again. Yes, it will. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands, and this is my confidence. You never fail. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands, and this is my confidence. You never fail me yet. No, no, no. Sing it out, seen you move. I've seen you move. You move the mountains, and I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way when there was no way, and I believe I'll see you do it again. I've seen you move. You move the mountains, and I believe I'll see you do it again. Made a way when there was no way, and I believe I'll see you do it again. I've seen you move. You move the mountains, and I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way when there was no way, and I believe I'll see you do it again. I'll see you do it again. Oh, again. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. You never failed me yet, and I never will forget. You never failed me yet. Oh, no.
Peace, bring it all to peace. The storm surrounding me, let it break. Let your name still call the sea to still, the rage in me to still every wave. At your name, Jesus, Jesus, you make darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Call these bones to live, call these lungs to sing once again. I will praise Jesus, Jesus, make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Jesus, Jesus, you make darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Your name is the light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is the light for
Thanks, Randy. I got a little love tap on the rump. That was pretty nice. So today I wanted to first of all introduce myself and my family to you. Most of you, I know you, but I know we have some new faces, so I definitely want to introduce my family to you. This is my little family. This is my Presley in the middle, who is now actually taller than her mom. This was taken in November of last year, and now she is taller than her mom and about to close in on me, and I'm hoping that's just an about. I don't know what it is about a dad. You kind of want to be taller than your daughter. I don't know what it is about that, but so that's my Presley. She's my little tennis player, and you'll see her up here leading worship sometimes. And so that's her. My Grayson is 12 years old. He's wearing the blue plaid there. And he is just starting a youth band this week. Tonight's his first practice, and so playing the drums, so we'll see how that goes. My daughter Avon, who's 8 years old. And then my sweet wife, Kelly. I didn't put our ages there. She felt like that might be offensive. To promote this series, I did a little Facebook Live video, and some of you may have seen that. My wife and I had a little conversation because she told me, hey, you need to let me know when you're recording, all right? So if you look in the back of that video, there's this awkward moment when I'm recording, and all of a sudden my wife opens the door, and she doesn't know I'm recording even then, and she was kind of slummed out, and so she comes in the door, and pokes her head in, and she's waiting. She thinks I'm just on the phone, so she just waits, smiling in the background. You have to come check this out, and then awkwardly leaves the scene. So make sure and check that out. It gets real awkward, and we had a little conversation about that. Don't worry, I got her set straight. It was cute. Yep, that's what she said, too. That was really cute. Thanks for that. Today, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your purpose in life and your priorities. And I think that's a really important thing for us to look at as fall gets kicked off. How many of you, as you're looking at your fall calendar, if you've got kiddos, how many of you already are wondering, are we going to have even one single night at home? Anybody? All right, so some of you, you've got kids in high school, middle school, elementary. Some of you've got babies, and then you've got one all the way in middle school, and so you're running around like crazy. We luckily have some in-laws that help us get our kids back and forth. I'm not sure how in the world, some of you without grandparents in the neighborhood, how in the world you actually get your kids back and forth, but ours were pretty dependent on our in-laws just to help us. And so when we were looking at our schedule, it was a little bit overwhelming. We kind of got a little short of breath and thought, how in the world are we going to do all that this semester? And so I thought, man, it's probably a good thing for me, at least, to go through and look at what are the purposes that we're created for in life, and what are the priorities we're made for, and let me be selective about the things that I choose. And so we're going to look at purpose a little bit. Purpose is the reason for which something is done or created, or for which something exists. I think it's important to have a purpose statement, and so when I signed on as the Heights family minister, I've been here for 10 years and just started this new role as the Heights family minister. My purpose was very clear. I want to equip families to live and share the gospel. That's it. Very, very succinct, very clear. Let me talk about a couple of things I want you to know about that are going on at the sign-up tables in the back. We have a nearly newly and needs updates marriage training that's coming up. Starts on September 9th. It runs the same span as Life Group. And what that training is meant to do is, for those of you, maybe you're just kind of talking about getting married, or maybe you're engaged, or maybe you've been married for a few years, maybe you've been married for 5 or 10 years, and you're thinking, man, there's still some things we'd like to go tweak. Or maybe you're a little bit like me, and you've been married 20 years, and your spouse still hasn't figured it all out, and you think they could benefit from some training. Well, this is meant for you to be able to come and be a part of that. And so we're going to have that sign up in the back. When I'm done here today, I'm going to be back there. I'd love to meet you if you're signing up for that, so that I can kind of make sure I've got a face with your name and know who I'll be contacting over the next couple of weeks to let you know about books and things like that. So we're going to have that newly and needs updates marriage class, and that'll meet up here on Sunday nights. We also have men's and women's ministries. One of the ways that I want to equip families to live and share the gospel. I believe that men and women need a place where they can go and they can learn, and they can be with people going through the same struggles and the same victories as them, and talk about those things. And so we're going to have a lot of neat things going on in women's ministry. I saw a couple of cool Bible study sign-ups that are going on out there in the back. And then for men's ministry, I think Kyle talked about it a little bit last week, but we're going to do a little shooting activity where we go out and blow things up and shoot clays and shoot targets, and that's going to be on September the 8th. We sure would love for you to go out and bring your ammo and share with us and blow stuff up. And we'll talk about the Lord in the middle of all that somehow. We'll see. And then we have a golf tournament on September 22nd. It's really not a golf tournament. Let me tell you what's happened to that. We're really not very good at golf, we decided. And so, because we're horrible at golf, with the exception of 2 or 3 people, we decided that 4 golf was probably a better fit for us. So we're going to meet up at 4 golf, and the guys are going to hang out and get to know each other a little bit and talk about some of the things that God has in your life, and also just get to know each other a little bit and connect. So some of those are some of the things that we have going just as a family here at the Heights. I used to work for South Plains College. I resigned there about 3 weeks ago, and they had a vision statement. Their purpose was to improve the lives of students, and I liked that because it was real clear. Just a real clear, succinct statement to improve the lives of students. For a moment, what I want you to do is I want you to look at what your purpose is with your marriage or family, or maybe if you're not married, what is your purpose in life? And I want you to write that down. Just give it a shot. Write it down in one sentence. What is your purpose? Many of you are looking at me and not holding pencils. It's going to be harder to write that way. Hey, this is always going to be my lecture hall, man. That's right, that's right. I want you to write down in one sentence what your purpose is, what your family's purpose is. Now, some of you may be writing something down, and you may have latched onto something real quick. Others of you may be thinking, man, this is the first time someone's asked me this. I need a little time to process that. I think it's important that you do that because your purpose establishes your destination. This is where you're headed. And it also sets your course. It says this is how we're going to get there. If we don't have a purpose or something written out as far as what our family is going to be or who we're going to be, then it's very difficult to get there, and you won't know it if you do, right? And so your purpose is an important thing. Your purpose also establishes your priorities. Now, as we talk today, one of the things that I hope happens is you'll begin to look at your purposes and your priorities very differently. You know, there was a dude named Paul in Acts 22, and he was repurposed. If you ever look at Paul's story, Paul's going along, and he's got a very different purpose, and all of a sudden, God gets a hold of him and says, no, I'm going to repurpose you. I love that story because what that means is for every one of us in the room, no matter where your course is right now, no matter what your purposes have been, God can get a hold of your life and repurpose those things, right? He can repurpose your marriage. He can repurpose your family. Or maybe he can give those things purpose if you haven't felt like they've had purpose. Now, some ideas on purpose. Rick Warren wrote a book in 2002. It was published, and it was called The Purpose-Driven Life. And it talked about some of the purposes of a human being. I like these purposes. I think it's important for us to kind of revisit those. The first one, you were planned for God's pleasure. You were planned for worship and God's pleasure. Did you know that God delights in you? Now, some of you, even when I say that, I see you look at the ground, and I've said this several times in here before, but God delights in you. For you to have a true understanding of who God is, this is one of the very first things you need to understand. I like to read this to you. I heard somebody do this years ago, and I've done it a few times after, and you may have heard me do this before in here, but I want to remind you about how God looks at you. I'm going to open up to Psalm 18. It says, I love you, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer. My God, my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from my enemies. Now let's listen to where he was. The cords of death encompassed me. The torrents of destruction assailed me. The cords of Sheol entangled me. The snares of death confronted me. In my distress, I called upon the Lord. To my God, I cried for help. From his temple, he heard my voice, and my cry to him reached his ears. Then the earth reeled and rocked, and the foundations and also the mountains trembled and quaked because he was angry. Smoke went up from his nostrils and devouring fire from his mouth. Glowing coals flamed forth from him. He bowed the heavens and came down. Thick darkness was under his feet. He rode on a cherub and flew. He came swiftly on the wings of the wind. He made darkness his covering, his canopy around him. Thick clouds dark with water. Out of the brightness before him, hailstones and coals of fire broke through his clouds. The Lord also thundered in the heavens, and the Most High uttered his voice. Hailstones and coals of fire. And he sent out arrows and scattered them. He flashed forth lightning and routed them. Then the channels of the sea were seen, and the foundations of the world were bare. At your rebuke, O Lord, at the blast of the breath of your nostrils, he sent from on high, he took me. He drew me out of many waters. He rescued me from my strong enemy and from those who hated me, for they were too mighty for me. They confronted me in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my support. He brought me out into a broad place. He rescued me because he delighted in me. He didn't have to. When you call out to God, he delights in you. He got angry and he came down and he rescued you. This is our God. He delights in you. Now, for those of you that haven't let that really sink in, your theology will always be skewed if you don't understand that God delights in you first. So your first purpose is to understand God's delight in you and to delight in him. You were formed for God's family, his fellowship. You were formed as a son and daughter of the King. What a cool thing. You were also formed to be in relationship with others. I've heard many that think it's very cool nowadays to say, I'm not going to be part of a church body. I'm going to go do this thing spiritually on my own. And what you're saying is, I deny purpose number 2. I was formed for God's family. I was formed for them, for this family. Now, the truth is please know, you weren't just formed to be in God's family for what they could do for you. You were also formed to be in God's family because of what you could do for them. So God knit us all together. It's a really beautiful thing. You were created to become like Christ. So through discipleship, through this thing called sanctification. Sanctification is where we become more like Christ as we walk along in our walk with Christ. Now, please understand me. Jesus is not someone who loves you if and when. If I do this and when I do this. Jesus loves you as you were, as you are, and as you will be. So he's not waiting until you become this certain product until he loves you. He loved you then. He loves you now. In the future. Okay? So please know you don't have to get everything together for him to love you. You were shaped for serving God. You were shaped for ministry. The truth is every single person in this room, you have gifts, you have abilities, you have spheres of influence that God has put you in, and he's given you a certain personality, a certain temperament. And guess what, parents? Your child has those same things. Parents, I need you to hear me say this. In God's kingdom, he needs some weird kids here and there. And I don't mean that tacky. What I mean is the truth about some of your kids is they're a little different. Right? I mean, I know a couple of y'all's kids. They're real different. And you're really worried about them. And you're thinking, man, where is this kid going to make it in the real world? You know, they're going to get eaten alive. I mean, maybe you've got that kid that's got it all together and everything just seems to go their way. And then maybe you've got this kid that you're just like, man, what in the world? They must be their mama's kid, right? Got stuck in that gene pool and they can't get out. Let me tell you what, parents, you need to be able to give your kids the freedom to be themselves because God has a place for them to serve regardless of how quirky or weird or different they are. He has a group of people that they were meant to impact. So when you look at your weird kid, understand there may be a sphere of influence that only that child could walk into and make a difference for the kingdom of God. Isn't there some hope in that? Some of you with some weird kids? Isn't that some hope in that? Some of you that are weird adults? If you're like, I don't know who's weird in my family. You were shaped for serving God. I do want to remind us on this, though, that please never forget number 2 if we're looking at number 4. Because the truth is when you're in a church body, in a church family, sometimes we forget the idea that although you were shaped for ministry, if it's outside of being a son and a daughter of Christ, you're missing out. Let me give you an example. I've talked about this a little bit before, but when a hired man goes out and works with his master, he works in the field with him all day long, and he does what his master requires. At the end of the day, he hopes that he'll get his wages, and then he'll go back to his home away from his master. And he'll hope he's earned his pleasure so he can go back again tomorrow. Let me tell you what's different about a son and daughter of the king. A son and daughter works along with their father in the field, working for the harvest. And then at the end of the day, the father says, you come with me. Everything I have is yours. Come sit at the table and let's laugh and let's dine together and let's have relationship. And we sleep under the same roof as our father. Now that's a very different than some idea that some of you have to God, because you're still sleeping in slaves' quarters wondering, can I ever please a master? And if you ever get in that spot, please let me let you know what's going to happen. It's a phrase we call burnout in ministry all the time. You're going to end up burned out because you thought your purpose was to please your master, not have relationship with your father. When you have a relationship with your father, you'll enjoy the field in a very different way. It's an amazing thing. And you were made for a mission. Now, the truth that I think that many of us miss in today's Christian culture is we believe that if someone gets to walk on this stage and they've been called to ministry. It's the same thing that I deal with as a worship leader sometimes. The idea that some people think, well, he's supposed to lead worship and I'm supposed to sit and watch. And no, we're all participants in the kingdom. We're all participants in ministry. The truth is, if you ever gave your life to Christ or accepted his invitation, guess what? You were called to ministry. You were called to the mission field that day. So never let vocation and location get you messed up. I mean, the idea that, yes, someone might have their full-time vocation as a minister at a church, that's more about location. I'm at the church. Every one of us are ministers. Our location just may not be at the church, right? It's going to be somewhere, and that's going to be a big part of what we're talking about today. Now, those purposes should drive your priorities. What are priorities? Priorities are the fact or condition of being regarded or treated as more important. And you see, I had to deal with this in my life recently. Last year, I guess it was last summer, I decided it was kind of time for me to begin looking at other careers. I wanted to do some different things, and so I began to pursue a license in real estate and have had a ton of fun doing that. But I kept my full-time job at South Plains College at the time. I was also a worship leader here. And so I've got all these things going on. And so I would get up at 4:30 in the morning. I would go through my real estate class, and I would get all that taken care of. And I try to have all that done by about 9 or 9:30 so that I could hang out with the family and then do the other things I need to do. I was teaching a couple of online classes. And then last semester, I taught 8 classes while I was trying to do real estate. And then I tried to be up here too. And then I tried to be present for my family. And how well do you think that went? Some of you live a life very similar. So you know exactly that's not going to go very well. And so what I began to realize, my wife sat me down and said, hey man, you're not present when you're here with me. When you're here with the kids, you're not present. And I wasn't, because I've got this, all these things I've got to get done. And so what I began at first to do is, okay, I've got to get some balance in life. All right, I got to figure out some balance. I got to figure out how to equally balance this and this and this and this and this. And I began to study balance, and I've realized what I don't need is balance. What I need is a sense of priority and to understand what those priorities are. You see, balance is treating everything equally so that I can juggle. Priority acknowledges some things as being much more important than others. And isn't that the truth, that some things are much more important than others? I wonder if a stranger was given this definition, the fact or condition of being regarded or treated as more important. And maybe this stranger had a peephole on your life. Maybe they were somehow had some insight on your life and watched you throughout your comings and goings of the day. I wonder how they would rank your priorities. I've listed some priorities there for you. I've listed things like career success, wealth, comfort, hobbies. All the moms in the room, you forgot what hobbies are, right? Men, we love hobbies. I've got 100 hobbies. All I want to do is do more hobbies. I love hobbies. You wives, you're like, I used to have a hobby. Now it's called laundry, right? We've had to have a conversation about that before, my wife and I. She said, hey, you could have a hobby of laundry too. Oh, well, I don't like that hobby. Anyway, entertainment and fun. Maybe that's a way that you invest your life. Fitness and beauty. There are many of you that get up at 4:30 and you hit the gym and you're there and you're looking great. At 4:30 in the afternoon, you're like, what was I thinking? Your family and marriage could be a priority. Your relationship with God, relationship with friends, or maybe fill in the blank. What are some other things? I want you to real quick take a piece of paper. And I want you to rank, if someone was watching your life, don't tell me what you think your priorities are, but if someone was watching your life and watching the way you invest your time and money, what would they think your priorities are, just as an outsider? Take a few minutes and just let that sink for a minute. If you're here with somebody else, I want you to reach over and I want you to tell them what that stranger would probably observe if they had to list your first 3 priorities. See if you can be honest, or if you're going to lie to whoever you brought to church with you. I like the way y'all whisper. It's creepy. Super creepy. So for me, kind of some of the things that were happening, and maybe this is the same thing for you. I have all these things going on sometimes, right? And you've probably seen this analogy before. It's not a new analogy. In fact, I've saw it for a long time. The idea that, okay, so I've got, I want to go work out, so get that in. And I've got, got this committee that work asked me to be part of. Oh my gosh, in the education field, they want you to be a part of every committee. And luckily, they don't pay you for those. But anyway, and be part of committee. Oh, or maybe I've got, serving at church. I've got to make sure and get that in. And, I've got my social media, and I want to make sure and keep up on my Instagram and Facebook and Snapchat and Twitter, right? And I got my video games. I got to get those in. And I've also got my hobbies, fishing and snowboarding and cleaning my gun, David Gray. And you got those things, right? And you get all these things in, and so what begins to happen, you're like, okay, here's work, and here's my relationship with God, and it just doesn't even fit in the jar, right? And you've probably heard this analogy before. And so for me, I definitely think it was true. There was a point where I needed to look at my priorities and take out some rocks. And for me, that meant I couldn't keep, right, multiple full-time jobs. It just wasn't going to happen. I guess that's what they call them, full-time. So I couldn't do that, so I had to remove a rock here and there. And I don't mind that analogy. I think it's okay. I pulled up this image, and I think it's funny. You may not can see it very well, but it's got things like play, like entertainment. It's got family, a big rock in there. It's got work. And then it's got religion outside of there, because we didn't have room for that. And then it's got recycling as a hobby, like as a priority. They don't know we're in West Texas, right? Recycling really doesn't take much of my time at all. I don't even want to admit the amount of time that probably takes. But you may have seen that before. So for me, I felt like I needed to begin to study what's God's priorities for me. And so I opened my Bible and I started looking at verses on what does God have to say about priorities. And there was one that it just kept getting pointed back to over and over and over. And you probably learned this one when you were in Sunday school, or if you're a new believer, one of the very first verses you heard or learned. It's Matthew 6:33, and it said, "But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." I love words, and I like to know what they mean, and so I always love to look the definition up, and I love to use a Strong's and kind of go into what the original language said about those words. The word prior, the Latin word meaning first. But seek ye first. In the Bible, it makes it very clear that first is first in time, and first in place, first in rank, and at the first. Here's what that meant for me as I began to search for priorities in my life. If I were going to have a living and active relationship with God, it had to happen first in the day. It had to. Because it had to be first in time and first in rank. And as I began to study this, I thought it's got to be very first thing in the morning. For a long time in my walk, I thought, well, I'll just kind of throw it in late at night or on a lunch break or whenever. And I definitely think we can integrate those things into it. But let me tell you what I saw my wife, the transformation that I saw her go through. She started doing this thing called the fives. And I'm going to talk more about the fives as we go today. The fives is where you get up at like 4:55, and at 5 o'clock, she would begin a Bible study, and she'd begin to check in with other women. And at 5 o'clock, man, she just goes to the Lord and gets on her knees and prays. And she started that about 2 years ago. I thought it would just be a weird deal where she just did this and kind of bothered me at 5 o'clock when she got out of bed, and this would be over in 5 weeks. And so she did this for 5 weeks, 5 o'clock in the morning, and began this network with other ladies who were doing the same thing. And I began to watch my wife, the spiritual giant, begin to emerge in her. And she loved it. And I thought to myself, why would anyone love getting up at 5 a.m.? That's a horrible idea. So she signed up to lead a fives group the next round. And then she led another one, and I think now she's done 4 or 5 fives. And she's planning on doing another one this fall. When you go back to that sign-up table, ladies, there is a place where you can sign up to be a part of the fives. Now, as I sat in elders meeting with other elders, we began to visit about each one of us. Our wives had gone through the fives, and our wives had experienced dramatic transformations in their spiritual walk. And as men of God, we began to sit and think, maybe we could learn something from our wives. What a strange concept. And we said, what if we did the same thing? And so, gentlemen, you will have the opportunity to meet with me and other men in our church who will also be getting up at 5 o'clock beginning in September. I guess the sign-ups begin in September. We start doing that in October, I believe. And for 5 weeks, we're going to ask you to get up early and very first thing in the morning go to the Lord at 5 a.m. And you're thinking, well, man, I like to sleep in a little bit. Here's what I've learned. If I don't treat it as the most important thing, then sometimes my priority gets pushed back, and I just don't have room for it in the jar. And so I'm going to put it at 5 o'clock, and I'm going to learn from my wife. So I wonder what would happen if, as a body, the Heights Fellowship got up at 5 o'clock. Now, there's this old discipline, and I think many of you still practice it, called fasting. This is very similar. Instead of giving up food, you're giving up sleep. And you're saying, my relationship with God is even more important than sleep. Or maybe it's more important than the thing that I do at night when I stay up till midnight. I have to go to bed at 10 in order to get up at 5 to pursue God. I wonder what's going to happen in our church body when we've got a group of women and a group of men getting up at 5 o'clock and praying for each other. I just wonder what could happen here. You'll have a chance to be a part of that. But it had to come first for me. It has to come first. And so as I began to study this is something I've been doing. I'm getting up early to be in front of the Lord. I even go in front of the Lord before I go work out, which I used to go work out first. And I said, it's got to be first. It's been the first thing that I do. So I do that before I go work out. And then I love this word when it says, and all these things shall be added unto you. Added, I love the definition of it. It says, placed in addition, lay beside, or annexed. Annexed means brought in, encompassed, wraps it in there together with it. All these things in these verses before, he's talking about all these things that we need in life and want in life. And it basically says if you'll seek God first, all of these other things will be annexed. They'll be enveloped and surrounded and brought to you. I love that idea. So purpose gives us a driving force that should establish our priorities, the act of keeping your driving force first in time and rank. And then provision happens. That means God provides all other things if we keep our priorities in the right place. So how in the world can we do this in your home this season? Because you're thinking, well, we signed up for club volleyball, and we've got a kid that's in baseball, and you know, if the kid's in baseball, they've got a practice or game 5 nights of the week. And you signed up for this, and you're like, oh, crud, we're already committed. We've got 7 kids, and they've all got 7 activities. And by the way, we signed up for a couple things too. How in the world are we going to do all these things? Well, what I want you to do is, first of all, parents, I want you to breathe a little bit. So everybody take a big deep breath in and let it out real slow. And say this out loud. I don't have to be perfect. Say it out loud. I just need to be present. Say, I need to be present. So present means that this relationship with God doesn't necessarily start first thing in the morning and then you leave it behind, but it carries on in everything else you do as a family and as a parent. So some things you could put in your schedule to help. Make sure if you're going to put a lot of activities in your schedule, you also surround it with some other consistent training. Men of God, one of the very most important things you can do is simply establish the habit of taking your family to church. Now, I'm definitely preaching to the choir here, right? You're here. So awesome. You nailed it. But find some rituals. Find some places you can put that are consistent in your life, that these are the things we're going to do on a weekly basis. These are things that are scheduled and carved out that we will do every week, whether that's youth on Wednesdays and church. These are the things my family is going to do. I'm going to put these things first in rank and time. And make sure your schedule allows for those things. There are clubs and activities and sports teams that my family's not been a part of because it would have replaced this consistent training. And I felt like this consistent training, at the end of the day, for my child as an adult, was much more important than the T-ball league. And nothing wrong with T-ball. I'm going to talk to you about that here in a minute. Find natural rhythms. Find natural space in your child's schedule and in your schedule to have God talk. You know, for me, I'll show you a picture of it in a minute, but for me, that was drive time. I take my kids to school every morning, and they are strapped in, and I can lock the doors. They can't get out. They have to listen to me. It's incredible. And so during drive time, to me, is one of the most natural places of rhythm you can find to actually have God talk with your kids. I'll give you a way to do that here in a minute. And then use teachable moments. So again, we don't have to have a full-out Bible study with your kids every day, but using teachable moments and natural rhythms can give you the ability to walk in rhythm with your kids' schedule and to teach them. Deuteronomy 11:18 says, "Fix these words of mine in your hearts and minds, tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Teach them to your children, talking about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates." Here's what that says to me, that your spiritual walk with Christ isn't just a little Bible study with your kids or taking them to church. It's also in your everyday things that you're doing, right? And maybe it's just as powerful or more powerful in those things than anywhere else. So here's some ways that we do this in my home. May not can see it very well, but for my drive time, all we did is every week we had a little Bible verse, and I'll have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday written there, and a different question about that Bible verse, a little conversation question. I'd put this up on my rearview mirror, and on the way to school, we would all try to recite the Bible verse. This one's, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, and your strength. And then I would say, so what does it mean to love the Lord your God with all your heart? And we would talk about that on Monday. And the kids would talk about that, and then we would say a little prayer. And that was it. I mean, it was about a 5-minute thing. Please, parents, do not talk over 5 minutes to your kids, probably ever. They cut you off at about 2 minutes, all right? They're done with you. So keep it short. Keep it short. But Tuesday, we have a different question. You know, what does it mean to love the Lord with all your soul, with all your strength on the next day? That's something simple we could do, and it was in the natural rhythm, and they're strapped in, they're locked in, they can't go anywhere. We're going to do that 10-minute trip every single day. It was a perfect rhythm to put the kids in. You see a little Bible story book. I love that specific one. My daughter, who's 8, she still loves a good bedtime story, so we read the story, and we always read her little storybook Bible to her. That's a natural rhythm of the day. It's part of our nightly routine. Many of you already do this with your kiddos. It is one of the most important parts of your day. I was sitting down with a guy that I love and respect last night talking about his family, and he says putting my kids to bed is about a 2-hour ordeal. I put one of them to bed, then I have to get the other one, and man, what an incredible thing. Now that's what masculinity was meant to be, a man that's going to say, I will give 2 hours to help get my kids to bed and disciple them during that time. What a cool thing. The dinner table, you see that? I mean, the dinner table is a great place. My wife bought a little study book, a little devotional book, and we put it on the dinner table. It's a really short devotional. It's got a couple little questions in it. Now, how many of you get to have dinner all at the table together more than twice a week? Yeah, okay. For many of you who've got kids middle school age or wise, man, they're running everywhere, right? So this may not be able to happen, but if your family's able to, real simple, just have some talk around the table. Another way to do this is, what are your sads, glads, and sorries? My wife has always wanted to do that with the kids. We talk about what they're sad about, what they're glad about, what they're sorry about, and then we have a little prayer at the table while we're talking. It gives us something to talk about at the table and gives us a natural place in our day to talk about what the Lord's doing in our lives. Now, you see the Camaros and the egg. These are ways I talk about sex with my kids. And I would have to explain that way more to you, probably a different sermon. My kids dread seeing Camaros because anytime they see a Camaro, I always kind of share a story with them, and they know we're going to talk about sex, and do a little sex education in the middle of that. If I ever see an egg, we're cooking eggs. I almost always talk to my kids about sex when we're cooking eggs. You're like, this is the most disgusting thing, but here's the deal. If you don't talk to your kids about sex, somebody's going to, right? I would rather it be me. So real quick, just for fun, this is one of the ways I always talk about eggs to get the kids engaged. Why do some eggs have chicks in them and some don't? Reach over and tell somebody this. Why do some eggs have chicks in them and some don't? So for 11 years, I taught a human development class, and this is the way I always started the fertilization and conception chapter. And it was fascinating. Let me tell you some of the answers that college students gave me. The farmer would hold some eggs underwater and drown the chicks. One person said, it's fertilization. I said, well, tell me, how does that happen? Well, the farmer fertilizes the chicken. That's interesting images. Now, if you don't know, you probably need to Google that real quick, all right, how that all works so that you can talk to your kids about sex. But I feel like it's my job to train them about those things, because if I don't, somebody else will. This is a good teachable moment. This is a Taylor Swift song. She's better known for the things that she does on the mattress. Whoa. I heard my daughter singing that one day when she was about 12. She's busting out, singing a little Taylor Swift. And I was like, what kind of things what do you think you're singing about right now? I don't know. You know what she's doing on the mattress, right? And so, I have a little sex education right there, and integrate spiritual values in the middle of all that. But these are all times of teachable moments, and trust me, if you watch television with your kids, you have lots of opportunities for teachable moments. So understand, what I'm trying to get you to understand is you don't have to have this long Bible study with kids to teach them, right? It's all these teachable moments that come up during everyday life. Now, one thing that I really think is important for us today is to look at these rocks again. You see, when we have this analogy of everything being like a rock in a jar, you've heard that analogy before, you heard me talk about it. It gets messed up a little bit because, man, even if you could, say that your relationship with God is here and family is here, and then maybe you were able to wedge in some of these other things and not put in the things that aren't important. At the end of the day, this is just a jar of rocks, isn't it? Your relationship with God was never meant to be compartmentalized. Your relationship with God was never meant to be a rock down here at the bottom and left separate from everything else. Let me tell you what your relationship with God was supposed to be like. This is the presence of God in your life, and this is what it was supposed to look like. You see, every one of those activities, every one of those priorities that you've chosen this fall, whether it be club soccer, whether it be your kid in band, whether it be that committee you serve on, whether it be work, whether it be marriage, it was meant to be encompassed, surrounded, enveloped, and annexed into the presence of God. The truth is every one of these places where you are is a place where you're an ambassador for the kingdom of God. So when you go to your work, guess what? It's not just, I'm going to go to my work and fulfill that priority, then move on to my next thing. When you go to your work, it goes back to Rick Warren's number 5, you were created for a mission. So when you go to your work, you are a light there. You're a powerful force there. You see, every day before I go, whatever I do, before I go to work especially, I pray, may I be light for somebody. May I inhabit my sphere of influence so that your kingdom is there. Yesterday, I'm working an open house, and not a big deal, but somebody gets there a little bit late. He's another realtor, and I'm putting up everything, and this conversation just begins to happen. Everybody else is gone. We're kind of packing up, and all of a sudden, this conversation turns to spiritual things very quickly, and it's because I turned it that way. And all of a sudden, he begins to share with me these longings that he was having in life and how these things weren't satisfying him. And I was able to, in my workplace, at an open house, begin to share with him the gospel. And I didn't make it awkward or weird. I didn't say, hey, let's accept Jesus right here in this stranger's house. Hope they don't come home while we're bound down on the couch together, right? But I was able to say, hey man, let's get together and let's talk about that, right? You talk about some of these things that weren't satisfying you. Let's get together. Let's start meeting together and let's talk about some of those things. The truth is there are people in your workplace today that you will be the only person that God put you in that sphere of influence specifically to influence that person. He put you in that college class so that when you walk in that classroom there, you connect with the person beside you and you have the opportunity. He put you in that recovery group because that person beside you needs to hear about the Lord. He put you in that marriage because you're supposed to build up your spouse. Every sphere of influence, every priority, every one of these things that he chose for you, that you've chosen, is an opportunity for the presence and the power of God to go out and go forward. So it's not just a jar of rocks, right? Your relationship with God was never meant to be compartmentalized. So as you talk about your rocks and your priorities, maybe in the car on the way home while you've got your spouse strapped in, talk about how you could specifically approach those as a commissioned vessel to share the good news of Christ. Each one of those rocks. How in the world, when we go to my kids' basketball games, I mean, we're going 3 times a week to this deal, how could we make that an opportunity to share the gospel? How could we make that an opportunity to be light? And when you begin to look at those things like that, all of a sudden you find purpose in those things. Think about this. How could your kids be a part of an active part of sharing the good news and those things? I had a lady that she runs a gymnastics program here, and that morning I got up and did my quiet time like usual, and I just prayed God give me an opportunity to be in a sphere of influence that's a little different today and maybe be in somebody's sphere of influence. And she grabbed me and said, hey, these girls are in gymnastics all week, and they're here on Wednesdays a lot of times, so they're not part of youth groups. Do you think you could find some people that would come and do a little devotional for them or something while they're here in gymnastics? But we can figure that out, but we can do something. But what a cool thing is, even just going and dropping my daughter off at her gymnastics, have the ability to be light in that situation. Choose what gifts or abilities or attitudes does your spouse have and each of your kids have that will help make that possible. Again, that weird kid. Man, there may be some kids at lunch that could really benefit from sitting with another weird kid. And your kid has the light of the world inside of them. How can you develop those gifts? You know, we have a children's ministry here at the Heights meant to do that. Help you develop those gifts in your kids. You've seen and you're going to see over the course of this season lots of our youth band, and I met them when they were 5 years old, who are now leading you in worship because we found those gifts in them, we've developed those things. And that's just one of the gifts. There's many other things that can be developed. My son has been recruited to go work in the children's area. He's a 7th grader, and he's gifted with little bitty kids. He's just gifted with them. And he was recruited to go work in the children's area. We're all about developing your kid into the gifts and talents that they have for the kingdom. So as you leave here, figure out a word or a sentence about your purpose. See if there's one word you could boil down your vision to. I mean, what's the banner? What would be the one-word banner or purpose that you would hang over your family as you enter this season and this fall? And see if you can live that. Now, these are some of the lessons that we taught at family camp, and so got that question, how you lead your family differently after family camp. And my question for you would be this: how would you lead your family differently, knowing that every one of these rocks and priorities that you're going to walk into this week is an opportunity for the presence of God to be here? I want to tell you one little thing about these little rocks, and this is kind of funny. I got a small jar. I'd originally chosen some pretty large rocks. Didn't work. So I told my kids, I said, hey, let's go out and find some rocks last night. And kids aren't good at a lot of things, but they're dang good at finding rocks. And so, in fact, some of your kids, like, they carry them around. Like, you're like, what is this? It's a rock. My daughter, Ava, I should have brought it. It's so awkward. She found this piece of concrete that was just like the end of concrete. She says, Daddy, this is Mary holding Jesus. I was like, yeah, okay, sure. Anyway, we kind of left our neighborhood. We were on our bikes looking for rocks. And I looked up, and there was an old golf clubhouse. It was actually the old golf clubhouse the Heights used to meet in years ago. The Heights started 16 years ago. And, man, I needed some rocks. And so we went up to the little clubhouse where the Heights used to meet. And there's a rock fountain there. And every one of these rocks is out of the rock fountain where the Heights was planted 16 years ago. And it reminds me of what our vision still is for you. that you would be a minister wherever you're at. That every priority you have and every sphere of influence would be inhabited with the presence of Christ. We've been about that for 16 years, and we're still about that today. Are you about that? I hope that you are. Our ushers are going to come forward, because the truth is we have to have funds to do a lot of these things. That's just the way that it works, right? So to do all the cool children's ministry we're going to do, the family ministry, I got to sit with the elders this week, and we talked about the problem we have right now where we're running out of space for the activities that we have planned for families, and we're trying creative ways to come up with space. And some of what we do with our funds is going to help us do that. So as I pray, this is part of your worship. But I want you to be praying over what is the purpose of my family and what is my purpose and how can we live that out this semester. Dear God, we thank you so much that you delight in us. We thank you so much that you have not called us to be compartmentalized. You have not called us to restrict our relationship with you to an hour in the morning or a song on the radio or an hour at church, but you've called us to live a full life in relationship with you and for that to overflow onto every sphere of influence that we have. I pray for parents here today, Father, that as they're going back and forth from activity to activity, they're not just thinking, how in the world are we going to get there on time? But they're thinking, how are we going to get there on purpose? And may our lives be about the same. May we have the purposes that you have. Amen.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Appreciate that. And I hope that you've heard, not just been here and been a part of another lesson this morning, but you've actually heard and been challenged by what Jim shared this morning. Great stuff for all of us to be encouraged by and to be challenged by as we walk out this morning. Just a few things on the Justin Notes for you to be aware of. Jim mentioned earlier all the different sign-ups out here. If you're looking for an adult life group, you can go do that. If you're looking to be a part of the marriage class that Jim and Kelly are going to lead throughout the fall session and semester, you can sign up for that. Men's and women's groups as well out there. And be sure to take a look at the right side of your Justin Notes. If you're a college student that is here this morning, we'll be kicking off our University Ministry Multiply a week from Tuesday on the 28th, and many other events. So make sure you check that out, look at it, know where you can plug in and where you can be a part of the ministry here at the Heights Fellowship. You guys have a great morning and a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next week.
Good morning, church. How are we doing today? Hey, it's good to see y'all. Let's stand to our feet and sing. Since the day that you have made, whatever comes, I won't complain. For all my hope is in your name, and now your joy awaits my praise. I give thanks for all you have done, and I will sing of your mercy and your love. Your love is unfailing. Lord, I am grateful. When I was down, you brought me out, set my feet on higher ground. So here I stand, you are my God, your faithfulness, my solid rock. Yeah, I give thanks for all you have done, and I will sing of your mercy and your love. Your love is unfailing. Lord, I am grateful. I give thanks for all you have done, and I won't forget all the battles you have won. Your love is unfailing. Lord, I am grateful. And as we lift our hands, the heavens open, heavens open. So let our lives declare the love our God has spoken over. Come on, church, sing this out. And as we lift our hands, the heavens open, heavens open. So let our lives declare the love our God has spoken over us. Thanks for all you have done. We'll sing of your mercy and your love. Your love is unfailing. Lord, I am grateful. I give thanks for all you have done, and I won't forget all the battles you have won. Your love is unfailing. Lord, I am grateful. Hey, it's good to see everybody. Why don't y'all go shake a hand, go hug somebody, tell them good morning. that y'all are here this morning. We're going to continue to worship, so why don't y'all just stand and we're going to sing some more. fullness of your worth. This we know, this we know. Come on, church, sing this out. And every enemy will flee as we declare your victory. This we know, this we know. And I will call upon the Lord, for he alone is strong enough to save. Rise, his shackles are no more, for Jesus Christ has broken every chain. And I will call upon the Lord, for he alone is strong enough to save. Rise, his shackles are no more, for Jesus Christ has broken every chain. Oh. Jesus' name will break every stronghold. Freedom is ours when we call his name. Jesus' name above every other. All hail the power of Jesus' name. Sing it out. Jesus' name will break every stronghold. Freedom is ours when we call his name. Jesus' name above every other. All hail the power of Jesus' name. All hail the power of Jesus' name. And I will call upon the Lord, for he rise, his shackles are no more, for Jesus Christ has broken every chain. And I will call upon the Lord, for he alone is strong enough to save. Rise, his shackles are no more, for Jesus Christ has broken every chain. He's broken every chain. Oh, we thank you, Jesus. We just want to encourage y'all that take some time to be in prayer. In this front right here, up here at the front, this is an altar for you. If you need to pray or simply just be prayed for, we want to encourage y'all to take that time to come up here, or even just go to somebody. And maybe it's the person next to you or somebody else and say, hey, can you pray for me, or can I pray for you? In the Heights family, one thing I know that we're good at is when we see somebody up here praying at the altar, we go and pray for them. Amen. We want to encourage y'all just to do that in this time. Walking around these walls, I thought by now they'd fall, but you have never failed me yet. Waiting for change to still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me yet. And I know the night won't last. Your word will come to pass. My heart will sing your praise again. Jesus, you're still enough. Keep me within your love. My heart will sing your praise again. Yes, it will. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. Your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. Your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never failed me yet. Never failed. I see you move. You move the mountains, and I believe. I see you do it again. You made a way when there was no way, and I believe. I see you do it again. See you move. You move the mountains, and I believe. I see you do it again. You made a way when there was no way, and I believe. I see you do it again. I see you move. You move the mountains, and I believe. I see you do it again. You made a way when there was no way, and I believe. I see you do it again. I see you do it again. Oh, see you move. Promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. Your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. Your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail.
words through Jim. May we hear them and apply them. In your name we pray.
Good morning. There you go. Got a little spirit in you. I like that. A little spirit in you today. So I wanted to kind of quickly introduce you to my family, just in case you hadn't met us. I know that most of you I know, and some of you, if I don't, I want to make sure you know who my beautiful bride is and all of our spawn. This is my daughter Presley in the middle. She is actually, that was in November of last year. She's actually taller than my wife now, and she's closing in on me. I'm not sure exactly what it is that makes me uncomfortable about that. I'm hoping to hold her off. Like I've got about a half inch right now on her. If I can just hold her off, I'll feel better about myself as a man. And my son Grayson, he's 12 years old, and he is going to be jumping in the youth band for the first time tonight on the drums, and so I'm pretty excited about that. My daughter, you'll see her lead worship every once in a while with us. And my daughter Avon, she wants to be a vocalist. She isn't really able to remember the words to things right now, so she makes up a lot of her own things. And so, sometimes that's worshipful, and sometimes it's concerning, the lyrics that she throws in. So we're working with her still, but she's 8. And then my wife Kelly and I have been married almost 20 years, and she's an assistant principal over at Miller Elementary. And so that's my little family. Today, I want to talk to you about the fact that my little family already feels a little bit overwhelmed from our schedule that we haven't quite started yet this fall. How many of you, as you look ahead at your schedule, if you've got kiddos in the house, maybe you've got a middle schooler, an elementary, and a high schooler, or they're all spread out, or maybe you've got a new baby and you've got your activities or whatever it is, or maybe you're just living life, but you look ahead at your fall schedule and you think, how in the world are we going to pull this off? Right? I mean, you're running left and right and got 10 different activities, and thank goodness we've got some in-laws. It's amazing. My in-laws help and get my kids back and forth quite a bit for us, because without them, honestly, I don't think we'd make it home with all 3 kids every day, and for sure they would never make it anywhere they were supposed to go on time or maybe even get there at all. So I'm very grateful to have in-laws and my kids have grandparents that they depend on. How many of you are grandparents out there today? Hey, you're not done yet, right? And you're looking at me like you're telling me, right? Some of you are like, definitely, I was thinking this was going to be an easy gig, but please know you're not done that. You are still discipling your kids, right? And maybe your kids aren't living here, but please know we have people in this church that need to be discipled. You're not done yet, so you heard me say it. If your kids aren't here and you're thinking, what are we going to do with ourselves? Let me hook you up with some families, all right? They need you. Did you know I looked at some research recently that talked about families tend to have a higher success rate if they live within a short proximity to grandparents. This is a pretty cool thing. I think that most of us, we have the tendency to want to move off and be away and do those things, but the truth is, one of the single best predicting factors for a kid's life is how many adults they have pouring into them, and grandparents are a big part of that. My grandparents poured into me hardcore, and I'm ever grateful. So thank you, grandparents, if you're still in the game. Thank you for continuing to play and continuing to disciple your kids. But for my family and I, man, we're wondering how in the world are we going to pull this off this semester? And it really brings me into this conversation about purpose. I mean, what is my family's purpose? Purpose is the reason for which something is done or created, or for which something exists. Now, when I took on the role of the Heights family minister, and one of the things I wanted to do very quickly is I wanted to simply get a purpose statement. So for me, that purpose statement was this: to equip families to live and share the gospel. I didn't want to make it real complicated. I didn't want to commit to a program or a system or a certain study, but what I wanted to say is, at the end of the day, when I look at the things I'm doing, is it equipping families to live and share the gospel? And if it is, that's what my job is. Now, some things you're going to see in the back today to help you do that. First of all, I want to tell you about our Nearly Newly and Needs Updates marriage class. That class is going to begin on September 9th. That is going to start at the same time as life groups start. And what we're going to do is basically meet in the summit, or if we look like we have a pretty big group, we may have to move in here, so we'll see where we're going to meet. But we're going to talk about just some things to help strengthen your marriage. And no, it's not just exclusive to nearly and newly weds. hopefully we're going to get a lot of nearly and newlyweds because we want to disciple them from the very beginning. My wife and I were very blessed and fortunate to have these incredible people who are in their 40s who poured out life and wisdom and truth, biblical truth to us when we were in our 20s and newlyweds. We feel like it's our turn to do the same thing for them. And so we are going to take people, if you're thinking about getting married, you've had that conversation, or maybe you're engaged, and or maybe you've been married just for a short period of time, that nearly and newly applies to you. And that needs updates applies to those of you who may be a little bit like me, that after 20 years of marriage, your spouse still doesn't have it figured out and they need some training. Right? So I think I'm going to bring Kelly, see if that can help her a little bit, because I've pretty much got it all worked out. But we are going to be going through and trying to kind of talk about some keys to making your marriage successful, and I sure hope that you'll join us for that. There's a sign up in the back for that. Myself and James and Deidre over here will be back there helping sign people up for that when we get done with the service. So I sure hope you come back for that. Some other things you're going to see. You're going to see that Allie, our women's minister, has got some incredible things lined up for our women this fall. Got some cool Bible studies and some really cool stuff. And so I sure hope that you'll go back there and sign up. Don't be scared of Allie. She's a good person overall. So she'll be back there helping you get signed up. For the men's side of things, we're going to blow some stuff up real early this semester. And I really do mean blow it up. We have an appointment on the 8th to go out to some land and shoot. We're gonna shoot some shotguns and some targets and probably get some tannerite involved. And then we're going to talk about how the Lord's working in your life. So I don't know exactly how we're going to work that in, but we're going to do it one way or the other. And then there's also a men's golf event. We decided we're not good enough golfers to be on an actual golfing range. It was not a good thing. I guess you could call it a course. I've only played golf once in my life, so I'm a farm boy. We didn't really have golf there. If you ever swung an instrument like that, it was a hoe handle, right? So golf never appealed to me a whole lot. It just reminded me of chopping weeds. And so, but we're going to go out to 4 golf, and we're going to have a good time of connection and fellowship out there. It's funny when you meet with believers, we say the word fellowship a lot, and I'll talk about that word. It's kind of a Christian word. You don't hear like Buddy at the bar say, hey man, let's get together and have some whiskey and fellowship. But we do this as believers. We talk about having fellowship. I'll talk about what fellowship is here in a minute. But we want to offer those things to you this semester. I sure hope that you'll go back and sign up for those. We've got a lot of other fun things we'll be unrolling over the course of this semester, and I really hope that I can help our THF family connect with each other. I do want to also let you know, in the context of family stuff, on Wednesday night this week we have a family worship service. The first time we've ever really done that. Has a night designated just to bring your kids, your youth, and our youth band is going to lead us, and we're going to have a family worship service and some kind of prayer time to get you started this fall. So please come up 6:30 on Wednesday night. We're going to have a great time, and it's going to be a time for you to invest and pray over your kids and them to do the same thing for you and hopefully kind of get you going in the right direction this semester. When I worked at South Plains College, I worked there for 11 years. I just quit 3 weeks ago. It's scary, not going to lie. And their vision was, or their purpose was to improve the lives of its students. I liked that because it was short, it was succinct, and it was very to the point. So I wonder, what is you and your family's purpose? I'm not just asking that as a rhetorical question. I'm asking you to take out a pencil. I haven't given up my lecture hall quite yet. Take out a pencil, and I want you to write down what your purpose in life is. If you're part of a family with kiddos and all that, right now I want you to write down what your family's purpose is. I know some of you aren't writing because you're looking at me with your hands in your pockets. That's okay. You may not have brought a pencil. But I want you to think through with that purpose. If you had a one-sentence purpose statement for your family or maybe for you, what that would be. Now I want you to lean over and tell somebody maybe that came with you what that purpose is. It's going to get awkward. That's what I specialize in. Speaking of awkward, did anybody happen to see my Facebook Live video? All right, so first of all, my phone falls down in the middle of it, so I've got to get a better system going. But anybody happen to see my creepy wife, like, pop in behind the video? I love that girl. It was so awesome. She didn't know I was recording, and so she like pops in, and she's going to tell me something funny, I guess, because she's got a huge smile on her face, and she's kind of got her hair done funny, like, you know, I don't know, like be playful, I guess, and so she's flopped her hair over when she pops through the door, and she just stands there grinning. And like just stands there for an extended period of time, like awkwardly long period of time before she creepily like realizes. If you haven't seen that, please go back to that Facebook Live video and make sure and comment. Maybe send my wife a message about her creepy cameo. Make her happy. Now, some of you, you're looking at that and you're like, man, I can't quite get a hold of what our purpose is or what my family's. I want to just let you know, first of all, today and any time that I teach on family or parenting is not a day of guilt. The truth is our families, we live in far too much fear and far too much guilt as parents, all right? You are not going to get it all right. So say out loud, we are not perfect. Right? And in those times we're weak, we point our kids to Jesus and say, glad he is, because we're not, right? And so we're not trying to be perfect parents. We're not trying to have a perfect marriage. We're not trying to just nail it. And there's not a perfect person in this room that's doing those things. So you can just take some of that pressure off of yourself right now. But I will tell you what purpose should do. It should provide your destination and set your course. I mean, the truth is if you don't know what your purpose is, you're sailing aimlessly in a lot of ways, right? If you don't know what your destination is, how will you know what choices to make this semester or any semester for your kiddos? How will you know what things to have in your life and what things not to have in your life? Your purpose should be the wind that moves your ship, and it should establish your priorities. We're going to talk about priorities. Now, as we talk, I want you to understand this, that God is in the repurposing business. There's a guy named Paul, if you've ever read his story. He's trucking along, and he's got a very different purpose. And all of a sudden, God gets a hold of his life in Acts 22, and he says, I'm going to repurpose you. He didn't give him much of a choice, honestly. I'm going to repurpose you. I'm going to give your life an entirely new purpose. And Paul would go on to write half the New Testament. And many of the words of encouragement that you spend reading in your Bible are going to be things that he wrote because God repurposed him. So no matter what marriage situation you're in today, God is a God of repurposing. No matter what family situation you're in, God is a God of repurposing. No matter where your life is today, God is a God of repurposing. He does it in powerful ways. And guess what? He'll take whatever was in that life where you felt like you didn't have a purpose, and all of a sudden, he'll give that meaning because he'll use it for a testimony. What a powerful God we serve. Now, Rick Warren in 2002 wrote a book called The Purpose-Driven Life, and he laid out some purposes for us, and I really do love the way that he laid them out. He laid them out really simple. For somebody like me, I could read and understand the purpose of a man. I felt like it was pretty cool. He said, purpose number one, you were planned for God's pleasure. You know that God delights in you? Now, some of you don't get that excited about that. And what I'm going to do, I've done this before here. I stole it from somebody else. But I think it was a powerful thing. I'm going to read God's word to you. I'm basically going to read the Psalm 18 over you. I just want you to listen. I just want you to take it in. This is what David's writing. He says, I love you, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield, the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from my enemies. And this is where David was. He said, the cords of death entangled me. By the way, this is where we were. The torrents of destruction assailed me. The cords of Sheol entangled me and encompassed me. The snares of death confronted me. In my distress, I called upon the Lord. To my God, I cried for help. From his temple, he heard my voice, and my cry to him reached his ears. Your God listens when you cry out. Then the earth reeled and rocked, and the foundations also of the mountains trembled and quaked because he was angry. Smoke went up from his nostrils. I mean, God's getting angry. He's blowing smoke. And devouring fire from his mouth. Glowing coals flamed forth from him. He bowed the heavens and came down. Thick darkness was under his feet. He rode on a cherub and flew. He came swiftly on the wings of the wind. He made darkness his covering, his canopy around him, thick clouds, dark with water. Out of the brightness before him, hailstones and coals of fire broke through his clouds. The Lord also thundered in the heavens, and the Most High uttered his voice, hailstones and coals of fire, and he sent out his arrows, and he scattered them. He flashed forth lightning and routed them. Then the channels of the sea were seen, and the foundations of the world were laid bare. At your rebuke, O Lord, the blast of the breath of your nostrils. He sent from on high. He took me. He drew me out of many waters. He rescued me from my strong enemy and from those who hated me, for they were too mighty for me. They confronted me in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my support. He brought me out into a broad place. He rescued me. This is my favorite part of the whole verse. It's the point of the whole verse. Why did he do all that? When we cried out to him, he responded with anger and love because he delighted in me. I want you to say that out loud. My God delights in me. Please understand that is your first purpose, to understand that your God delights in you and that we should delight in him. You were formed for God's family. You were formed for fellowship. So the reason I think that as believers we talk about it from fellowship is we have not only this get together as buddies, as friends, we have this family bond that bonds us, and it's very close to family members, and it's this fellowship. It's more than just friends. It's this thing that Christ has created, this family that we're in. You know, he's created you to be a son and a daughter of his. You are a son and a daughter of the King. You're in his family, and guess what? You're in a family with lots of other sons and daughters of the King. One of my friends recently said, I'm going to quit going to church. I'm going to quit being part of a community. One reason he said it because they're a bunch of hypocrites. And I told him, man, you'll fit right in. But the truth is you were created to be in that family. And not just for what they could do for you, but the truth is there'll be a time you can do something for them that they're going to need you to lean on. And to say I'm not going to be part of the family of God, you're completely negating one of your purposes you were created for. You were created to become like Christ through discipleship and sanctification. Sanctification is becoming progressively more like Jesus. Now, please know when I say sanctification, I don't mean that God is going to love you if, or God is going to love you when you do something. God loves you as. God loves you as you were. He loves you as you are today, and he loves you as you will be. God doesn't love if and when, he loves as. He loves you as you are right now. So just know, he's not waiting one day for you to be this final product that he can finally say, oh, I finally have something to be proud of. Oh no, he looks at you today and he delights in you, and his heart skips a beat when he sees you. You were shaped for serving God. You were shaped to be in ministry. You know what? One of the things that I am passionate about doing as a family minister is to help your family equip your kids and you to be in ministry. The truth is the Heights is a long history of making sure that members are not just members, but they're ministers. And we're going to do everything we can. In fact, my little boy right now is working in the children's area. He's a little 7th grader, and he's gifted with working with little kids. And what they're doing is they're developing that gift in him down there. You're going to see next week my friend Allie Carson lead worship. And she's a junior? She a junior or senior? Junior? Senior? Okay. She's a senior out at Friendship, and she's going to lead in worship. I met Allie when she was about 10 or so, and recognized very quickly, oh, she's a worship leader waiting to happen. So she'll lead you in worship next week, and there'll be other members of the youth band that are part of our team as we go throughout this journey together. And what an amazing thing to have a place that sees those gifts in your kids and wants to disciple them and find a place for service. And the truth is you have a place for service in our church body as well. Now, what we have to be very careful of is not to let number 4 ever get in front of number 2. Right? Number 2, remember, you were formed for God's family. You're a son and daughter. So I've said this before, but I want to make sure and reiterate this as we're going through purposes, because some of you have gotten so carried away with, I'm going to do ministry, I'm going to serve God, God's going to use me. And I will long argue that God never wanted to use you. You're not a hammer. He wanted a relationship with you. You're a son, you're a daughter. So the difference, right, is the hired man goes out with his master and he works in the field. And at the end of the day, after he works hard, he gets his wages and he goes back to his quarters and he hopes to please his master so that tomorrow he'll be paid again and he can go work with his master. Let me tell you what working with your father looks like. When you're working with your father, you go out in the field and you work. And during that time, you talk as you work and you toil and you work the ground. And then at the end of the day, he says, hey, let's go back to the house because everything I have is yours, son. Everything that I have is yours, daughter. So for those of you that feel powerless in your walk, understand everything that he has is yours. And he invites you to the table and you sit and you commune with your Father in heaven. Some of you have hired man mentality, have son and daughter mentality, and it'll change your view of ministry. Hired man mentality will lead to burnout. So if you've ever been burnout in ministry, it's because you got too carried away with serving God, forgetting you were a son or daughter of God, meant to serve with him. You were made for a mission, and that's what I'm going to talk to you a lot about today. One of the great tragedies of Christianity in our culture is the idea that we believe that somebody on this block of wood up at the front of the stage has some special permission to do ministry that we don't have, or some special anointing to do ministry that we don't have. No. There are people that are vocationally ministers. Vocational is about location. I do it at the church. Understand, you are all ministers. So no matter where you're at, what you're doing, you are a minister and you're called to ministry. And one of our things that were very important to us at the Heights is that we help you figure out what your mission field is, and I'm going to help you do that today. In doing that, it's going to be important that you find out what your priorities are. Priorities are the fact or condition of being regarded or treated as more important. That's what a priority means. The fact or condition of being regarded or treated as more important. So for me, the reason this was a really personal thing for me is, I guess it was last summer that I began this kind of journey of a different career. And it was going to be a part-time career, and so I would get up in the morning at 4:30 and I would kind of work on my class in order to get my little license to do real estate. And so I started working on that and worked on that from about 4:30 to 9 in the morning, and then I would do other stuff. And I had a couple of online classes I was teaching for South Plains College at the time. Then I was doing worship here, and it was kind of a cool thing, and God blessed a lot of those things. And so in the fall, I decided I would continue to do that, and it was awesome. And in the spring, something happened that my little part-time job turned into another full-time job. And so what happened is I've got basically 3 full-time jobs, and then I've got to be a dad and a husband. And my wife sat me down one day and said, you are distant when you're home. So something about you is disconnected when you're home, and here's why. Because, man, I've got a transaction going on over here, and I don't want to let them down. And I've got a class I've got to teach tomorrow, and I've got to know what's going on with that. And, oh my gosh, I haven't said the worship set out for this week, and someone just texted me, what a terrible worship leader. All right, I've got to get that fixed up. And the truth is I began to go on this journey like I've got to figure out, I've got to get out of this because I can't manage them all at the same time. I wonder if some of you have found yourself in the same place before where you've had maybe too much going on. I'm going to ask you this question. If a stranger was given this definition, the fact or condition of being regarded as treated as more important, and then told to rank your priorities based on your daily schedule, your bank statements, and your web search history, social media footprint, how would they rank these things? So not how do you want it, but if someone really just had a peephole into your life and was watching you live and tracking your bank statement, tracking your time, tracking your schedule and your social media and all that, what would they say your priorities are? Now, this isn't, again, a rhetorical question. I want you to take your pencil out. I want you to write it down. If someone was just watching your life, the money and the time you were investing, how would they rank these things? Now, I've put career success and wealth and fitness and beauty and hobbies and family, marriage, relationship with God, all those. You may have some others that are important to you. So I want you to write those down. I want you to rank them. How would they view your life as what's most important? What's your biggest priority? You've probably seen this analogy before as you're doing that your priorities sometimes get derailed a little bit or you get wrapped up in things. So maybe maybe you want to work out. So you get that. I'm going to go work out. I'm going to get up at 4:30. I'm going to work out. Okay, get that. All right. And then I've got to get laundry and lunches made and stuff for the kids. And I better check that Facebook feed and Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram. I'll get my Marco Polo video. Get that in there, right? Get all that stuff in there. And then, work takes a big chunk of time, so I've got to get to work and get my marriage in there. Right? Well, I got to work family in somewhere, and then, the work asked me to be on this committee. I was in education forever. They always asked me to be on committees. They never paid me for those. That was irritating. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, God's supposed to be important. You're like, I can't quite get him in the jar, right? It's just not enough. And so for me, right, there are times when you have to take some things out, right? There are some times you have to take some things out. So for me, I started realizing I can't do everything. Now this jar here, I just pulled this image off the internet somewhere. It cracks me up. There's one of them that really is funny to me. We got play, like entertainment. We got family. I think most of you say that's a priority for many of you. Work, obviously. Religion didn't quite make it in the jar. And then recycling. Like, apparently this is not in West Texas, I don't know. How many of you spend great efforts recycling? I wouldn't even get along with you probably, but I should be better. I know the world's burning right in front of me, but I can't stop myself from just throwing it away. All right. So, you've seen that analogy that the jar, right? We've only got a certain amount of room in the jar, and so we want to make sure that we choose things that are important to us and that are priorities. I began to struggle with this because I just didn't have room in my jar, so I started originally looking for balance. And now, here's what balance is. Balance is treating everything equally. So what I was doing is I was looking at my life, and I'd do a to-do list every day, and I would try to figure out how do I give everything equal time and balance it. And very quickly, God convicted me, you're not looking for balance. I don't want you to have balance. And a lot of us, that's what we're striving for, is to have some sort of balance. And here's what God taught me in trying to figure out how to structure my life is not everything is equal. Right? There are some things that are way more important than others. So even work is, and career success, and I would like to have those things, is that as important as family and marriage? I can't balance those things. No one is much higher than the other. My relationship with God is much higher than those things. That committee is not important to me at all. I don't know why I signed up for that committee. Not paying me for that committee. Come on. So very quickly I figured out balance wasn't really where I wanted to go, but figuring out priorities was. And as I began to study priorities, this one verse kept coming up over and over and over. And the writer is talking about all these things they need. And God's saying, don't worry about these things. Don't worry about these things. I'll take care of you. And then he ends with this and says, but seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And all these things shall be added unto you. And it was like when I read that, it was like neon when I was reading it. It was just flashing at me. Prior in Latin means first. And when you look at that word, when you take your Strong's and you figure out 4412 and your Strong's, you go and you look at what that word means in the language. It means first in time, first in place, first in rank, at the first. So a couple things I was convicted of very quickly were that my spiritual life with God, my relationship with him, not only did it need to be most important, but it had to be first, foremost important. It had to be the very first thing I do in the day. Very first thing I did. So I would like to go and work out and then maybe come home and have a quiet time or do that on my lunch break or whatever. And here's what this verse said. It says, no, I want it very first in the morning. I mean, right when you wake up, I want you to roll out of bed and get into the Word. I want you to go after me. I want you to meditate. In fact, I saw my wife model this. My wife went in this program called The Fives. If you've heard of it, we've got a sign-up sheet back there for it, by the way. I hope you'll go sign up for it in a minute. But The Fives, this crazy woman would get up at 4:50 in the morning, and she would stumble over to her Bible and journal, and she would connect with some other women on social media, and they would kind of do a little study and prayer time together at 5 a.m. in the morning. Every day, 5 days a week for 5 weeks at 5 a.m. Every once in a while, she woke me up on her way out of the bed, and that was irritating. But I thought, she'll get through with this, and we'll start sleeping in a little bit more. It'll be good for us. And then the next term, she signed up again. And then the next term, she led one. And I think she led another one. And I think she's done them like 5 times now. And she's going to jump into one in the fall. And here's what I watched happening with my wife. my wife began to grow in her spiritual leadership of our home, and she began to grow as a spiritual giant. It's a funny thing, in an elders meeting, we were talking about this, sitting there with other elders, and every one of our wives had done the fives, and we had the same story. We're like, we watched our wives do the fives, and all of a sudden, spiritually, they came alive. Became contagious. And we looked at each other and said, maybe we should learn something from our wives. Maybe we shouldn't just watch her roll out of bed. Maybe we should get up and do the same thing. And so, gentlemen, you'll have an opportunity to do that this semester. I'll be working with the group of men at the Heights, and we're going to go through the fives together. And we're going to get up at butt o'clock, and we're going to go to the Lord, and we're going to see how that works out for us. And here's what I believe. They have this discipline called fasting, okay? Fasting is where you give up something important to you in order to just delight in the Lord and let Him delight in you, and you find that He is more important and satisfies you more than those things. And they did that a lot, and the truth is what you'll be doing is a form of fasting where you say, you are more important to me than sleep even. Or maybe you're more important to me than that thing what I do from 10 to 12. I have to go to bed at 10 o'clock in order to get up at 5, so I'm going to give whatever that thing is I do from 10 to 12, and I'm going to get up at 5, and I'll pursue you first. So I'll make that commitment. I hope you'll make that commitment with me. I'm scared. I'm not going to lie, I'm scared. I have a feeling it may not feel good every morning, but I also have seen what it's done for so many wives, so many ladies in our church family. What an amazing thing that could happen in our church body if we had men and women getting up at 5 and fasting and praying over who God is and what He wants to do in their lives and what He wants to do here in our community. Well, I think we're just on the brink of amazing things here, because there's going to be a whole ton of people getting up at 5 a.m. praying. So I hope you'll be part of that with us. And I love the word, and all these things shall be added unto you. To place additionally, to lay beside, and annex. Remember, the writer was talking about, don't worry so much about your clothing and where that's going to come from, or where your resources or your provision is going to come from. And he ends with, seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. The word added, if you look at that definition, says to lay beside or annexed. I love the picture of it being annexed. So all of your needs, if you put those priorities first, will actually be annexed and enveloped and surrounded and brought into you. I love that idea of being annexed, those things being annexed. So your purpose is your driving force. Your priority is the act of keeping your driving force first in time and rank. And then you see provision, God annexing all other things. So some ways to do that in your home this fall for families out there, for people out there, you're looking for a way to, how in the world do I not only get up and have time with the Lord in the morning, but how do I carry that through my day? Well, first of all, I do think that we have to carve some time into our schedule, right? So I just want to let you know, if you're a man of God and you brought your family to church, I applaud you right now, because that is first step to me in consistent training of your family is, hey, Sunday morning we are going to worship the Lord. All right, this is something we're going to carve out of our schedule. My family has had to skip certain sports leagues and certain things because we wanted to be a part of that. Now, I'm not going to badmouth those sport leagues. I'm going to come back in a minute. I'm going to teach you how to make those amazing places where God can thrive. But I do want to tell you, you've got to carve some time out in your consistent schedule. Maybe it's not Sunday morning, but when is it going to be that we're going to consistently go as a family and have some discipleship? Our youth group, I can't brag on it enough. If your kiddo's youth age, man, I can't brag on it enough. They're creating disciples in there, on Wednesday nights. So be a part of that. Make that part of your schedule every week. Also, you need to find some rhythms. Find some natural spaces in your schedule for having God talk. For my family, we're going 25 different directions. And so one of the things that I find is that really about the only time that my kids are strapped in and the doors are locked is when we're driving. And at that point, they unless they jump out the window, they really have to talk to me and listen. And so driving is a great time to talk to them about what's going on, pray with them, things like that on the way to school. Look for teachable moments in their day. How do we use everyday moments to deepen lessons? So some things that we've done or we've done in the past. And what these things are intended to do is basically take Deuteronomy 11:18 and make sure we're doing that. That's fix these words of mine in your hearts and minds. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Teach them to your children, talking about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. What this is saying is your spiritual life was not meant to just be contained in the morning or at church. It was meant to be everywhere with your kids in everyday life, right? And so here's just a few examples of some things maybe you could do this fall, even if you're running around like crazy trying to get them someplace. There was a period of time when I took pretty much all the kids to school, and so I would put this Bible verse, I had a series of Bible verses, and I would put them on my rearview mirror. And every day I just had a question for the kids about that Bible verse. We'd talk about that question, and we'd pray over it. So this one's is love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. And one of the questions on Monday was, how do you love the Lord with all your heart? How do you love the Lord with all your mind on Tuesday? How do you love the Lord with all your strength? What's one's the hardest? And we just have little conversations about those things. And then say a prayer and let them out go into school. Man, they're strapped in. They can't go anywhere. Perfect time to disciple them. You see that little storybook Bible, that's one we've read through with my youngest daughter. And it was a really powerful thing. I mean, we read that every night at bedtime. So maybe bedtime is a time that fits really well in your natural rhythm and schedule. I had one of my friends last night was sitting down. He said, man, I'm taking my kids home. He'd been hanging out at my house. And he said, it takes me 2 hours to get them to bed. Man, that's masculinity. Let me just tell you, that is what biblical masculinity looks like. And here's why it took him 2 hours to get him to bed. I mean, I could knock my kid out and get him to bed. Cat, go to bed, right? What he does is he rocks them and he prays with them and he reads them a Bible story and then he lays them down and then he goes gives the next one and it takes him 2 hours or not to do that. Now, I'm going to tell that brother that you got to streamline that process, all right? You can't keep that going. But what a cool thing, man. That's what he's doing for 2 hours in the night. At the dinner table, I've got a picture of the dinner table there. Now, in most American families, we don't have many nights around the dinner table together. But when you do, my wife has a little book she puts there. It's got a short little devo, and we can talk about that while we're eating dinner and have a little prayer time. You also could do this little thing that we've done at my house called Sad, Glads, and Sorries, where you just kind of talk about what are the things that you were sad about today, what were the things you were happy about, and what about some things you were sorry about, and then pray over those things. Talk about, how you could be a minister even throughout your day, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Eggs and Camaros, that is an entirely different conversation about sex that I like to have with my kids. It gets real awkward anytime we cook eggs at my house. The reason is because I generally, if I'm cooking eggs, I'm going to ask my kids, like, why do some eggs have chicks in them and some don't? Real quick, talk to somebody around you and tell them why. Real quick. Why some eggs have chicks in them and some don't. I want you to clarify that with your... I see some of you are deep in thought. This was, I taught a human growth and development class out at South Plains for 11 years, and this was the first question I would ask them when we started the fertilization and conception chapter. And I got some interesting answers. Let me tell you some of the answers I got. Why some eggs have chicks in and some don't. Well, the farmer would take the ones he didn't want chicks in, and he would put them in a bucket of water, and he would drown the chicks. This is a college-age kid telling me this junk. You know what? One of these city slickers told me, they said, the farmer fertilizes the chicken. That was just outright disturbing. I got some really interesting answers. If you don't know that answer, I need you to Google it when you get home. Go talk to Randy Bunyard. He'll walk you through the basics of fertilization. But you've got to figure that out, because here's the deal. I believe that part of biblical training is training my kids about sex, and it's my job to do it, not the world's job, because somebody's going to do it. But it's my job to do it. So, yeah, we scrambled some eggs. We're talking about some chickens. We're talking about sex. Camaros, I'll tell you that one later, but it's a whole other way that we see a Camaro. I like to introduce conversations about sex to my kids. They don't like it. I remember my sweet little daughter was singing this Taylor Swift song. She's better known for the things that she does on the mattress. Whoa, and she's belting it out one day, and I was like, what are you singing about? She's like, I don't know. And then we had a teachable moment right there, right? So I hope that you're finding those teachable moments. Those are in the daily rhythms of your day, okay? You don't have to have a full-out hour-long Bible study to disciple your kids. Now, that analogy that I've kind of been putting in front of you is one that was put in front of me years ago. And again, it kind of promotes the idea that, oh man, if God's the most important thing, you make sure and get him in there first. And then we get family in there, and then you work on that as important, to get that in there. And then you'll have room for all the other important things. And if you don't have time for some of those other little things, it's fine, but at least you got all the important things in. And I do think that analogy speaks something to us. But even with that, I don't like that analogy, because what it does with God is it puts him down here as a rock at the bottom of your jar, that has no influence over the other rocks in your jar. And here's the truth about Christianity. This is the truth about walking with Jesus. When you walk with the Lord, here's your priorities. The presence of God does this. And he covers and he envelopes and he surrounds everything you're involved in. So the truth is your kid's not just part of that T-ball league. That T-ball league is a mission field for you. It is a place, a sphere of influence that God has put you so that you can be light in that place. So you're thinking, man, I've got to go to baseball practice 3 times a week and then a game on the weekends. Glory to God, because he's put you with a group of people that are going to be right there with you all that time. How in the world are you going to minister to them is the question. How do I take every rock in that jar and make sure that it's infused, surrounded, enveloped, it's annexed by the presence of God? So you go into that classroom, your workplace. You know, when I go into a workplace, one of the things I pray in the mornings is that God would expand my sphere of influence, both in my work and my home. I ran an open house on Friday afternoon, and the open house was over. I was putting up all the snacks, and a realtor came in late, and I was putting everything up, and he said, let me get out of here. He said, I'm new at this, and we began to talk about how each of us got into it, and he began to share his story, and his story had some kind of dark places in it, and I was able to begin to speak some light into those things. And we sat and we talked, and right there in an open house doing my job, guess what? The presence of God was there. He knew you were going to be at that job. He knew your kid was going to be at the lunch table they were going to be at. Some of you, have y'all got some weird kids, some of y'all? I got 3 weird ones. Anybody got just like, I mean, you don't have to raise your hand, but some of y'all got some awkward kids. I've been watching them. They're awkward. You're worried. You are worried about them, right? You're like, I don't even know how this kid's going to make it on their own. They're so weird, you know? Let me give you a little hope. God created that kid to influence a very specific sphere of influence that nobody else will be able to touch. Man, what a cool thing. Your kid has got some habits and behaviors you're trying to beat out of them that God specifically gave them so they'll walk into a sphere of influence one day, and maybe they don't sit with the cool kids. Maybe they sit at the other table and they're light at that table. Oh, parents, those weird kids are the best. Some of y'all are weird yourselves. It's genetic. So here's the deal. Every rock is a mission field. Your relationship with God was never meant to be compartmentalized. It was meant to be the driving force that annexes, fills, defines, and purposes every moment, every priority, every band practice, every work obligation, every conversation in your marriage is meant to be covered in the presence of God. Next week, I'm going to talk to you about how to teach your kids about the Holy Spirit and how to take this presence of God and allow Him to move in your life. Now, for me, no one ever talked to me about how in the world do you actually teach your kids about the Holy Spirit. We're going to say, how do you pour water? How do you allow the Holy Spirit to move in every one of these places? And how do you pay attention when God's talking to you in those places? And how do you teach your kids to do that? So that's what we're going to do next week. We're going to take this jar and we're going to learn how to use it. So ask yourself a few questions as you leave today, as you're driving and as you get your spouse strapped into a seatbelt. They can't leave. They're locked in, can't jump out the window. As you talk about your priorities this season, talk about how you could specifically approach those as a commissioned vessel to share the good news of Christ. Your kid's not just on that soccer team for their talent, they're there for their influence. Your kid's not just in the band because of their sousaphone love, they're there for their influence they can have. How could your kids actually be an active part of sharing the good news? Again, you've got some weird kids. You've got some kids that are talented in some areas. They're in spheres of influence. How can they use that? How can they be a part of being light in those places? Talk to your spouse and say, man, what are some gifts, abilities, attitudes that you have and the kids have that we can make it possible to turn all those rocks into mission fields? And how can we help develop those gifts? It's one of my things I'm passionate about is helping you learn to do that. And how can you lead your family differently knowing that it's not just a jar of rocks, but it's a mission field where the presence of God could be so heavy. I want to pray this over you as we go out. Psalm 90:12. Let me find that real quick and I'll read it over you. Teach us to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom. Number our days means that you are in charge of your priorities and you tell them what to do and you number them and you're able to give them purpose. So God, teach us to number our days. Satisfy us in the morning with your unfailing love that we may sing for your joy and be glad all of our days. May your favor rest upon us. Establish our purpose, our priorities, and the work of our hands. And that's my prayer for your families, that he would establish all of those things for you. I'm going to ask our ushers to come forward. Their job is to take your money. I'm just going to be real with you for a second. We, as elders, were sitting around the other night, and we're talking about problems with space that we're having at the Heights. What a great problem to have, to figure out how we're going to fit all these programs that we want to do in this building. And the truth is, it's going to require some things. We're looking at adding some walls some places and doing some things. And we need your money to do those things. And it's not just to make our building look better. It's to give your kid, it's to give you a place where we can help you be effective in all of your spheres of influence. So this is part of your worship today. So as they gather that, I'll pray over that. Dear God, we thank you so much that you have purposed us, Father. We thank you for that you've given us relationship. You've called us sons and daughters, and that you've given us a mission field. We just pray over that mission field. Amen. Before Randy gives you the announcements, I do want to say one last thing. Each of these rocks that you see in this jar, my rocks were too big for my jar. It was a sad thing. I got some big rocks, and they were too big. So I took my kids out yesterday afternoon on a bike ride, and kids aren't good at a whole lot, but they are good at finding rocks. I mean, they are incredible. Some of your kids be like bringing pockets of rocks in the house. You're like, what are you doing with those? They find rocks everywhere, right? So we took our bikes out of the neighborhood and couldn't find any in my neighborhood. We kept trucking down the road, and all of a sudden I saw the old Heights clubhouse where they originally founded the Heights 16 years ago. And we rode our bikes up to the little water fountain. If you remember, there's a water fountain on the side of the building. And we grabbed rocks from that water fountain. For 16 years, the Heights has been about turning members into ministers. It's been about making your rocks more than just rocks in a jar, and about the presence of God being over those things. I am so glad you're part of that with us.
Thank you, Jim. Just take a chance to look at your Justin Notes this morning on the right side there of that sheet of paper. There are many things that involve you or that you can be involved with. Life group ministry sign-ups, women's ministry, men's ministry sign-ups are all happening as we speak for the next 3 weeks out in the mall area. So if you haven't had a chance to do that yet and you desire to do so, then please come out when this service is dismissed and look at those opportunities to plug in and connect here at the Heights Fellowship where you can be a part. Also, our university ministry, our children's and youth ministries will all be kicking off here in just a little over a week, as well as one major announcement just to start throwing that out there, that on Labor Day Sunday, we'll just have one service again, 11 o'clock service, much like we had last week, so just put that on your calendar. And we'll continue to talk about that in the next few weeks. Also, as we dismiss, I just want to invite you to be a part of a baptism. We have a baptism immediately through these doors. And when you leave this morning, come be a part of that and celebrate in that baptism. We have a dad who will be baptizing his daughter this morning. So I know they would appreciate your encouragement and support in being a part of that this morning. Let me pray and we'll be dismissed. God, we do thank you for what you're doing in our lives, and God, help us to accept and receive the challenge that Jim spoke to us this morning in knowing what our purpose is and setting our priorities in life, knowing that you're going to give us the provision we need in all those areas. Don't let's just walk away from here this morning and just heard another message, but actually take those words to heart and apply them and let them impact our lives. God, use us this week to make a difference in our circles of influence, and it's your name we pray. Amen. You guys have a great week.